Picture this: a nondescript white van parked across from a bustling cafe in the heart of Berlin. 1985. To every passerby, it's just another commercial vehicle, perhaps waiting for a delivery or a service call. But inside, three intelligence officers are recording every conversation happening 50 meters away. Their equipment so sophisticated it can isolate individual voices through concrete walls. The van's windows, actually one-way mirrors with camera ports. The exhaust system, modified to run silently for hours. The license plates, electronically changeable at the flip of a switch hidden beneath the dashboard. This wasn't science fiction. This was Tuesday. Welcome to the shadowy realm of spy vehicles, where automotive engineering meets the dark arts of espionage, and where every detail from the paint color to the tire pressure serves a calculated purpose. For decades, intelligence agencies around the world have transformed ordinary cars, vans, motorcycles, and even bicycles into mobile platforms for some of the most audacious intelligence operations in history. These aren't the exploding, gadget-laden fantasy machines you see in Hollywood blockbusters, though the reality is often just as fascinating and occasionally even more outrageous. The vehicles that have shaped the landscape of modern espionage are masterpieces of subtlety, engineering ingenuity, and operational psychology. They represent the perfect marriage between hiding in plain sight and carrying technological capabilities that would make Q Branch envious. The fundamental challenge of any spy vehicle is brutally simple yet maddeningly complex. How do you create something extraordinary that appears completely ordinary? Intelligence agencies learned early in the Cold War that the most exotic sports car or obviously armored limousine was tactically useless if it announced its purpose to everyone within visual range. The true art of the spy vehicle lies not in standing out, but in becoming invisible through normalcy. This is why some of the most effective surveillance vehicles in CIA history were battered pickup trucks in Southeast Asia, rusting Ladas in Soviet territories, and forgettable sedans in the beige and gray tones that dominated 1970s and 80s automotive design. The vehicle had to match its environment so perfectly that even trained counter-surveillance teams would mentally dismiss it as background noise in the urban landscape. But beneath these mundane exteriors, spy vehicles pack capabilities that would astound the average motorist. The modifications began with the most basic element, the engine and drivetrain. Intelligence operatives needed vehicles that could pursue targets across varied terrain, execute high-speed evasion maneuvers, or idle for 12 hours straight while running surveillance equipment without the battery dying or the engine overheating. This meant custom cooling systems, reinforced suspension components that could handle the extra weight of armor or equipment, and often dual fuel tanks that extended operational range far beyond factory specifications. Some vehicles featured kill switches that could disable the engine remotely if the vehicle was compromised, while others had hidden secondary ignition systems in case the primary was sabotaged. The CIA's Technical Services Division became legendary for taking ordinary American sedans and transforming them into machines that could outrun, outlast, and outmaneuver anything the opposition could field. The visual modifications were equally crucial and far more subtle. Windows became one-way observation points using special films or mirror coatings that looked like standard tinting from outside but provided crystal clear views from within. Some advanced surveillance vans featured periscope systems that allowed operators to observe targets from positions where no human eye could naturally be, using mirrors and lenses hidden in roof racks or ventilation systems. The body panels themselves sometimes concealed remarkable secrets, false compartments for weapons, documents, or radio equipment built into door panels, floor wells, and trunk spaces with such precision that even thorough physical searches might miss them. During the Cold War, both NATO and Warsaw Pact nations developed vehicles with hidden compartments sophisticated enough to defeat X-ray inspection and trained search dogs. Using techniques borrowed from smugglers and improved with state resources, communication systems transformed these vehicles into mobile command centers. Long before cellular networks, spy vehicles carried encrypted radio systems, burst transmission equipment that could send compressed messages in fractions of a second to avoid detection, and sometimes even early satellite uplink capabilities. The antennas were cleverly disguised as standard AM/FM radio aerials or integrated into other vehicle components. In urban environments, vehicles might carry direction-finding equipment to track radio transmissions from opposition agents, with the gear hidden behind panels and connected to subtle antenna arrays that look like ordinary vehicle trim. The East German Stasi became particularly adept at this, operating fleets of surveillance vehicles that could triangulate radio signals with remarkable precision, while appearing to be nothing more than taxis or delivery trucks going about routine business. The human factor always remained paramount in vehicle selection and modification. Intelligence agencies maintained detailed profiles of what vehicles were common in each operational area. A Mercedes might be unremarkable in West Germany, but would draw suspicious attention in a working-class neighborhood of Warsaw. A Japanese compact car would blend perfectly into Tokyo traffic, but stick out in 1960s Moscow, where such imports were virtually non-existent. Agencies maintained vehicle pools that matched local norms down to details like factory-correct rust patterns, regional bumper stickers, and even the specific type of mud or dust that would naturally accumulate on wheel wells in different geographic areas. This obsessive attention to vehicular camouflage reflected a hard-learned lesson in the spy game. The smallest detail out of place could mean the difference between successful intelligence collection and a blown operation that might cost lives. Perhaps most remarkably, many of these vehicles remained in service for decades, passed between different intelligence services, refurbished with updated technology while maintaining their carefully cultivated ordinary appearance. Some Cold War-era surveillance vans continued operating well into the 21st century. Their analog recording equipment replaced with digital systems, but their essential purpose unchanged. These rolling platforms of espionage represented investments of hundreds of thousands, or even millions of dollars in modifications, and agencies extracted every possible year of service from them. The vehicles became legends within intelligence communities, earning nicknames and reputations among the operatives who used them, each one with stories of close calls, successful operations, and the peculiar bond that forms between an intelligence officer and the machine. That's kept them safe, hidden, and effective in the field. The evolution of spy vehicles accelerated dramatically as the Cold War intensified, with each side pushing the boundaries of what was technically possible, while maintaining operational security. The 1960s and 1970s represented a golden age of automotive espionage innovation, driven by the space race technology spillover and the desperate need for intelligence superiority. During this period, the CIA's Office of Technical Service employed some of the brightest automotive engineers and electronics specialists in the world, people who could have commanded top positions at Ford or General Motors, but instead chose to work in unmarked facilities designing vehicles that would never appear in any sales brochure. These engineers faced unique challenges that their commercial counterparts never encountered. How do you install a high-powered radio transmitter without affecting the vehicle's electromagnetic signature? How do you armor a sedan's passenger compartment without changing its ride height or handling characteristics in ways that might alert trained observers? How do you create a mobile photography platform that can capture usable surveillance images from a moving vehicle without specialized camera mounts that would be visible from outside? The solutions they developed were nothing short of brilliant. One particularly ingenious modification involved creating false fuel tanks that actually held considerably less fuel than they appeared to contain, with the remaining space converted into watertight compartments for sensitive equipment or documents. The tank would still register as full on the gauge and would even slosh convincingly when the vehicle moved, but hidden behind a false wall sat everything from radio equipment to emergency cash and weapons. Some vehicles featured hydraulic systems that could raise or lower the suspension on command. allowing an operator to change the vehicle's profile and appearance during extended surveillance. Operations. A van might sit high on its springs when first arriving at a location, then gradually settle lower over hours, creating the visual impression that cargo was being loaded even when the vehicle remained stationary and empty. These subtle psychological touches exploited how human perception works, using the target's own assumptions about vehicle behavior against them. Armoring presented unique challenges because obvious protective modifications defeated the entire purpose of a covert vehicle. Standard diplomatic limousines with their characteristic heavy appearance and bulletproof glass were fine for announced movements of important personnel, but field operatives needed protection that didn't advertise itself. This led to the development of lightweight composite armors that could be integrated into door panels and seat backs, providing protection against handgun rounds and shrapnel without the dramatic weight increase of steel plating. Special ballistic glass was developed that looked identical to standard automotive glazing, but could stop small arms fire, though it came with the limitation of being only a few millimeters thicker than regular glass to avoid detection. The engineering compromise was always the same: enough protection to survive the most likely threats without creating a vehicle so heavy and unusual that it drew attention. Some agencies went further, creating vehicles with deliberately sacrificial outer panels that would collapse in predictable ways during crashes or attacks, absorbing energy while protecting an inner safety cell where the occupants sat. This technology, interestingly, would later influence civilian automotive safety design decades after its classified development. Surveillance capabilities reached remarkable levels of sophistication even before the digital revolution. Film cameras with extreme telephoto lenses were mounted in false roof vents, behind modified grilles, or within dummy cargo boxes, all remotely operated from inside the vehicle. The CIA developed cameras that could shoot through specially treated one-way mirrors without any visible lens, using fiber optic technology that was years ahead of anything in commercial use. Audio surveillance equipment evolved from crude parabolic microphones to laser-based systems that could detect window vibrations from blocks away, converting those microscopic movements back into intelligible speech. A surveillance van from the 1980s might contain equipment worth more than most houses, all crammed into a space no larger than a walk-in closet and operated by technicians who spent months learning the specific capabilities and limitations of each system. The physical discomfort of these operations was legendary among intelligence personnel, spending 8, 12, or even 20 hours cramped in the back of a van, unable to exit for any reason. Maintaining absolute silence while monitoring targets represented the unglamorous reality of vehicle-based surveillance work. The vehicles themselves had to support these marathon operations with specialized life support systems. Climate control was critical because surveillance equipment generated tremendous heat, and operators couldn't crack windows without risking audio contamination of their recordings or visual compromise of their position. Some advanced surveillance vehicles featured separate heating and cooling systems that ran off the vehicle's electrical system without requiring the engine to idle, using heavily insulated compartments and efficient heat exchangers. Waste management was addressed with chemical toilets similar to those in aircraft, and food storage included small refrigeration units powered by the same battery banks that kept the surveillance gear running. The psychological strain of these operations led agencies to develop specific operator rotation schedules and training protocols, teaching personnel how to maintain alertness and decision-making capability during extended confinement. Some vehicles even included periscope systems not for surveillance, but simply to give operators in windowless rear compartments a view of the outside world, a small concession to human psychological needs that improved operational effectiveness. Counter-surveillance features became increasingly important as adversary intelligence services grew more sophisticated at detecting surveillance operations. Vehicles were equipped with warning systems that could detect if they were being followed, or if nearby vehicles were using radio direction finding equipment to locate their transmissions. Some featured rapid camouflage systems that could change the vehicle's appearance in minutes. Magnetic sign panels that could be applied or remove reversible license plates that flipped to show different numbers, even paint schemes that appeared different colors under different lighting conditions using special pigments. The KGB became particularly adept at creating vehicles with multiple identity configurations, maintaining detailed documentation and registration under several different identities. For the same physical vehicle, an operative could drive into a parking garage as a plumber's van and emerge minutes later as a florist's delivery truck, complete with different plates, signage, and even a different nominal owner and the registration database. This level of deception required extraordinary coordination between intelligence services and complicit government motor vehicle departments, but the operational advantages were substantial. The human cost of these operations often went unrecognized. Operators suffered from the physical toll of spending days cramped in vehicles, breathing stale recycled air, and eating cold meals while maintaining absolute concentration on their targets. The vehicles themselves, despite all their technological sophistication, couldn't protect operators from the fundamental vulnerability of their position if discovered. They were trapped in a metal box with limited escape options. Several surveillance operations ended tragically when hostile services or criminal organizations discovered the vehicles and their occupants, leading to the development of ever more sophisticated escape mechanisms, emergency communications protocols, and ultimately the hardest decision any agency faces: whether the intelligence gained justifies the risk to human life. The decision calculus around deploying spy vehicles became increasingly complex as the stakes of Cold War espionage reached their peak in the 1970s and 1980s. Intelligence agencies had to weigh operational security against mission requirements, and the vehicles themselves became pawns in a larger game of intelligence and counterintelligence. Every deployment represented a calculated risk, exposed to much capability, and the adversary learns your methods, potentially rendering years of technical development obsolete overnight. The Soviets were particularly aggressive in their efforts to capture and reverse engineer Western surveillance vehicles, going so far as to stage elaborate traffic accidents or mechanical failures that would force intelligence vehicles to stop in predetermined locations where KGB technical teams could quickly swarm the vehicle, photograph everything, and deploy back into the shadows before backup arrived. This cat-and-mouse game led to the development of self-destruct mechanisms for the most sensitive equipment, thermite charges that could be triggered remotely to melt electronics into unrecognizable slag, and breakaway panels that allowed operators to rapidly jettison the most classified components if capture seemed imminent. The psychological burden on operatives was immense. They drove vehicles that were simultaneously their greatest protection and potentially their tomb, loaded with equipment they might have to destroy in seconds, always aware that a simple mechanical failure or unexpected roadblock could compromise not just their mission, but national security secrets worth millions in development costs. The transition from analog to digital technology in the 1990s and 2000s revolutionized what was possible in spy vehicles, though it also introduced new vulnerabilities. Digital cameras replaced film, offering instant review of surveillance photos and the ability to transmit images in real time back to command centers. GPS navigation meant operators could position themselves with precision and track targets with accuracy that would have seemed magical to their Cold War predecessors. Laptop computers integrated into vehicle dashboards could run facial recognition software, cross-reference license plates against databases, and coordinate multi-vehicle surveillance operations with split-second timing. But this digital revolution came with a price. Electronic signatures became detectable to sophisticated counter-surveillance equipment, and the very connectivity that made modern spy vehicles so capable also created potential backdoors for adversary hackers. Intelligence agencies found themselves in an arms race not just of physical modifications but of Cybersecurity. Hardening vehicle networks against intrusion while maintaining the connectivity their operations required. Some agencies responded by maintaining fleets of both high-tech digital surveillance vehicles and deliberately low-tech analog backups, recognizing that sometimes the best way to avoid electronic detection is to simply not emit any electronic signals at all. The types of vehicles used for intelligence work also diversified dramatically as global operations expanded beyond the traditional Cold War theaters of Europe and Asia. And Middle Eastern operations agencies discovered that luxury SUVs and high-end sedans often provided better cover than deliberately ordinary vehicles, because in many regions, such vehicles were associated with successful businessmen, government officials, and other individuals whose presence wouldn't raise questions. The CIA and other Western agencies maintained fleets of Toyota Land Cruisers, the vehicle of choice for everyone from United Nations officials to warlords, precisely because they were so common in conflict zones that they became effectively invisible. In African operations, the same logic applied, but with even more rugged vehicles, beaten-up trucks, and elderly Land Rovers that could handle terrible roads while appearing completely unremarkable. The art of matching vehicle to environment remained as crucial as ever. But now operatives had to navigate cultures and contexts far more varied than the relatively predictable Cold War landscape. A vehicle that provided perfect cover in Kabul might be hopelessly conspicuous in Singapore, and agencies needed the flexibility to deploy appropriate assets to each operational theater. Motorcycles and smaller vehicles gained prominence in urban surveillance operations, particularly in congested Asian and European cities, where four-wheeled vehicles couldn't maneuver effectively. Intelligence services developed modified scooters and motorcycles equipped with concealed cameras, often operated by teams of two with the passenger handling surveillance equipment while the driver focused on navigation and counter-surveillance. These mobile platforms could slip through traffic, position themselves in locations impossible for cars, and break contact rapidly if detected. The drawback was obvious. Motorcycles offered no protection, minimal equipment capacity, and required operators to remain constantly visible and vulnerable. But in cities like Bangkok, Jakarta, or Rome, where motorcycle traffic was ubiquitous and often the fastest way to move through congested streets, these vehicles became invaluable tools. Some agencies even developed electric bicycles for surveillance work, taking advantage of their silent operation and ability to access bike lanes and pedestrian areas where motor vehicles couldn't go. An operative on an electric bicycle, dressed as a food delivery courier or commuter, could maintain surveillance in environments where any other approach would be immediately obvious. The terrorist threats that emerged in the late 20th and early 21st centuries forced another evolution in spy vehicle doctrine. Surveillance of terrorist cells required different capabilities than traditional state-sponsored espionage, longer duration operations in residential areas, more robust communications to coordinate with tactical teams, and armor sufficient to survive improvised explosive devices or ambushes. This led to the development of vehicles that looked like commercial delivery trucks or utility vans, but incorporated blast-resistant floors, run-flat tires that could operate even after being shot out, and communications equipment that could punch through interference and relay real-time intelligence to strike teams. And ethical questions that the Cold War's clear adversarial lines had never forced intelligence communities to fully confront. A surveillance van parked on an American suburban street, monitoring suspected terrorists, but also inevitably capturing the daily lives of ordinary citizens, represented a very different moral calculus than the same van deployed in Cold War East Berlin. These domestic operations required even more sophisticated camouflage and even stricter operational security, because the consequences of exposure weren't just mission failure, but potential legal prosecution and massive public relations disasters. As the Cold War ended and intelligence professionals entered the private sector, they brought their tradecraft with them, creating a shadow industry of commercial surveillance that used many of the same vehicle-based techniques developed for government operations. Private investigators tracking insurance fraudsters, corporate security teams monitoring competitors, and even suspicious spouses hiring investigation firms all created demand for surveillance vehicles and the expertise to operate them. This commercialization of espionage technology meant that sophisticated vehicle modifications, once reserved for intelligence agencies, became available to anyone with sufficient money, creating a situation where the targets of government surveillance might themselves be using similar techniques. The line between legitimate intelligence work and illegal surveillance blurred, and law enforcement found themselves having to develop capabilities to detect spy vehicles that might be operated by criminals, foreign agents, or overzealous corporate competitors. The modern era has brought spy vehicles into territory that would have seemed like pure science fiction even 20 years ago. Autonomous and semi-autonomous systems have begun to infiltrate intelligence operations, with vehicles capable of conducting surveillance missions with minimal or even no human presence inside. Drones naturally capture the headlines when people think about unmanned surveillance, but ground-based autonomous vehicles represent an equally significant development that receives far less public attention. Intelligence agencies have experimented with modified commercial vehicles, equipped with self-driving systems that can position themselves for surveillance, maintain station for hours, and execute evasion maneuvers if counter-surveillance is detected, all while human operators monitor from safe distances. These systems use the same basic technologies that power commercial self-driving cars, but adapted for intelligence purposes. LiDAR and radar systems map the environment. Artificial intelligence identifies targets and potential threats, and encrypted communications relay intelligence back to command centers. The advantage is obvious. An unmanned vehicle eliminates the human vulnerability that has always been the weakest link in vehicle-based surveillance. If the vehicle is discovered and compromised, no operatives are at risk, and the equipment can be remotely destroyed without endangering human life. The disadvantage is equally clear. Autonomous systems lack the human judgment and adaptability that often mean the difference between mission success and failure, and they're vulnerable to hacking and electronic warfare in ways that human-operated vehicles aren't. Electric vehicles have created entirely new possibilities for spy operations while also introducing unique challenges. The near-silent operation of electric motors makes electric vehicles ideal for surveillance work, eliminating the engine noise that has always been a liability when monitoring targets from close range. An electric surveillance van can sit completely silent for hours while running sensitive audio equipment without the constant drone of an idling engine or the periodic starts and stops that draw attention. The regenerative braking systems in electric vehicles also enable covert movement, with minimal brake light usage, reducing visual signature during nighttime operations. But electric vehicles also present problems. Their limited range compared to traditional vehicles can compromise operations if charging infrastructure isn't available, and the distinctive whir of electric motors, while quieter than combustion engines, is still potentially identifiable to trained ears. Intelligence agencies have had to develop strategies around these limitations, including deploying portable charging equipment disguised as other utilities, and maintaining hybrid fleets that can switch between electric and traditional vehicles depending on mission requirements. Some agencies have even explored vehicles with swappable battery packs that can be changed in minutes, extending operational duration without the hours-long charging sessions that would compromise surveillance operations. The integration of consumer technology has paradoxically made spy vehicles both more capable and more vulnerable. Modern vehicles are essentially computers on wheels, with dozens of electronic control units managing everything from engine performance to entertainment systems. This connectivity enables intelligence agencies to integrate surveillance equipment more seamlessly than ever before. using the vehicle's own sensors and systems as part of the intelligence-gathering apparatus. The same cameras that assist with parking can be repurposed for surveillance. GPS systems provide precise location tracking, and cellular connectivity enables real-time data transmission. But this same connectivity creates vulnerabilities that earlier generations of spy vehicles never faced. A determined adversary with sufficient technical sophistication can potentially hack into vehicle systems, compromising operations, or even taking control of vehicle functions. The infamous case of security researchers remotely hacking a Jeep Cherokee and controlling its steering and brakes demonstrated vulnerabilities that intelligence agencies had to take seriously. This has led to the development of hardened vehicle networks with multiple layers of security, isolated systems for the most sensitive functions, and constant monitoring for signs of electronic intrusion. The irony is that as vehicles become smarter and more connected, they also become more complex to secure, requiring cybersecurity expertise alongside traditional automotive and surveillance knowledge. The future of spy vehicles is being shaped by technologies that are still emerging, but already showing transformative potential. Metamaterials that can manipulate electromagnetic radiation could eventually enable vehicles that are partially invisible to radar and certain types of surveillance systems. Advanced battery technologies promise electric vehicles with ranges exceeding traditional combustion engines, eliminating one of the key limitations of current electric surveillance platforms. Artificial intelligence systems are becoming sophisticated enough to handle increasingly complex surveillance tasks autonomously, potentially enabling single operators to manage fleets of vehicles simultaneously. Quantum communications technology might eventually provide completely unhackable vehicle-to-command communications, eliminating one of the key vulnerabilities of modern connected vehicles. Some intelligence analysts predict that within 20 years, the traditional model of human operators in surveillance vehicles will be largely obsolete, replaced by networks of autonomous platforms managed by AI systems with human oversight. Others argue that human judgment and adaptability will always be necessary for the most sensitive and complex operations, and that autonomous systems will supplement rather than replace traditional approaches. What remains constant across all these technological revolutions is the fundamental purpose that has driven spy vehicle development since the earliest days of motorized espionage: the need to gather intelligence while remaining undetected, to move through hostile environments while maintaining security, and to protect the operatives who put themselves at risk in service of national security. The vehicles change, the technologies evolve, the threats adapt, but the core mission endures. Today, a nondescript sedan idling at the curb might contain surveillance capabilities that would have astounded Cold War intelligence officers. Or it might be exactly what it appears: just another car in an endless urban landscape. That ambiguity, that uncertainty, is precisely the point. The best spy vehicle is the one you never notice, the one that completes its mission and disappears back into the flow of ordinary traffic, leaving no trace of its presence or purpose. It's a rolling masterpiece of engineering, psychology, and tradecraft, and it's probably been parked on your street at some point, watching something or someone, gathering intelligence that might shape events in ways you'll never know. If you found this deep dive into the secret world of spy vehicles fascinating, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode from this Spy Gadgets and Tradecraft series. Drop a comment below telling me which spy vehicle technology surprised you most, or what aspect of automotive espionage you'd like me to explore next. Share this video with anyone who loves spycraft, automotive technology, or just appreciates the incredible ingenuity that goes into tools you're never supposed to know exist. And remember, the next time you see an unremarkable vehicle parked somewhere it probably shouldn't be, you might just be looking at $1 million mobile intelligence platform. Stay curious, stay vigilant, and I'll see you in the next episode where we explore the world of covert communication devices. Until then, keep your eyes open, because in the world of espionage, nothing is ever quite what it seems.